Hey everyone, today we are going to review one of the most trending American drama film of 2022. It is Armageddon Time. The film was directed and written by James Gray. The story follows 12-year-old Paul Graff through the ups and downs of his life in 1980. Now let's dive into the review and enjoy watching. Likes and subscriptions are highly appreciated. Armageddon Time happens in 1980 in Queens, New York City, and follows a Jewish American youngster called Paul Graff. He fantasizes turning into a craftsman and the class comedian, which lands him in a tough situation with an educator at his school, Mr. Turkletaub. He becomes companions with an African American youngster named Johnny Davis, who has failed a year and goes along with him in his efforts to test Turkletaub's sanity. In any case, in light of the educator's response, he understands that Turkletaub is way more extreme towards Johnny in any event, when he knows nothing about who the genuine culprit is. Away from this hard-to-miss climate of prejudice is Paul's monetarily stable family, which has every one of the eccentricities, show, and ill will that useless families normally have. Notwithstanding, during a supper discussion between Esther, Paul's mom, Irving, Paul's dad, Aaron, Paul's granddad, Ted, Paul's sibling, Mickey, Paul's grandma, Ruth, Paul's auntie, and Louie, Paul's uncle, about Paul's future in a non-public school, it becomes clear that prejudice exists in this family as well. Later on, when Aaron portrays a tale about how his mom got away from prejudice mistreatment in Ukraine, obviously Paul's family has confronted persecution. What's more, because of the discrimination against Jews in the US of America, it's apparent that Paul will confront similar in his lifetime. That is the reason Aaron persuades him to follow his fantasies and advises him to face any type of persecution. As a glaring difference to that, Johnny's fantasies about going to NASA are subdued by individual African Americans who let him know that the Foundation won't let him through because of the shade of his skin. The separation in Paul and Johnny's directions turns out to be considerably more evident when they are found partaking in weed. While Paul is thrashed by his dad and shipped off a non-public school, Johnny is basically compelled to stop school and do whatever he might feel like doing to squeeze by. Thus, despite the fact that the two of them have a place with minority networks, Armageddon Time sends the message that African Americans generally get the worst part of the deal. In this way, now that the center subject of Armageddon Time has been laid out, you'd anticipate that Gray, director of the film, should fully explore it by digging further into the relational elements of the characters and placing society at the center of attention. Frankly, that's what he does. However, it is so generic, far off, incoherent, and insipid that none of it hits any place on the close-to-home scale. The film's most educational second should be the scene where Paul limits any association with Johnny as a wire wall remains between them. Also, when Paul's new friends enjoy bigotry, he doesn't dissent and allows them to kid about Johnny. Notwithstanding, the composing is so level, the exhibitions are so abnormal, and the outlining is tasteless to the point that the unselfishness of Paul's effort to seem bigoted isn't significant. In any event, when Gray attempts to stress this change in Paul's character through a discussion scene with his educator, it's outright dull. Not as a result of the subject in question but since of the filmmaking. Presently, Gray doesn't need Armageddon Time to be a deadpan undertaking. That is the reason he tosses in an imagined plot improvement as Aaron's bone disease. This permits him to allow Aaron to give energetic discourse to Paul about the significance of confronting the people who partition based on race, belief, and religion. Why? Since Paul enjoys the benefit of mixing into the white swarm. Paul can get a seat at the table. Paul has monetary solidness and admittance to private schooling. In this way, he wants to utilize that honor to safeguard the people who aren't quite as prosperous as him. Also, it is as of now in this strenuously paced film that plainly Gray is so gobsmacked by the way that he had this revelation that the first class should be honorable that he essentially couldn't have cared less about making fascinating scenes. He is certain that rehashing a similar message and again will get the job done. Indeed, tragically, it doesn't and leaves the film's third follow-up in peril. And let's review the ending plot of the film. At the point when Paul gets back from Aaron's memorial service, he figures out that Johnny is basically on the run. He demands Johnny, who doesn't have a decent house, to remain in the improvised lodge that Irving had worked for Paul in their lawn. In the wake of hearing his folks mourn about his future, Paul chooses to take off with Johnny. How? He sees that the non-public school he goes to has a few PCs. Since they are uncommon and costly, he can sell them and construct his and Johnny's future with that cash. Since that is the best way to achieve his opportunity and assist Johnny with bypassing foundational mistreatment. Yet, when the time reaches really sell it, Johnny turns out to be the one to go into the store and in this way gets blamed for attempting to bring in cash off of taken things. The discipline that they get later is clearly lopsided. It's suggested that Johnny has been shipped off adolescent jail, while Paul gets off without any charges against him since Irving fixed one of the police's water warmers. During the closing snapshots of the film, Irving repeats for the umpteenth time that, as a Jewish individual in the US of America, Paul ought to use any open door he will push ahead. At the point when he goes to class the following day, he understands how unbalanced each establishment in the nation is and strolls into the distance. In this manner, Paul gets going as an individual who can recognize bigotry yet can't call it out in an express style. Toward the finish of his excursion, he sees bigotry work out continuously and neglects to prevent it from working out. You are lean to offer Paul some space since he's an incredibly thoughtful youngster. Furthermore, you need to trust that, as he grows up, he turns out to be more vocal about the monstrosities occurring around him rather than latently profiting from his place in the public eye. All things considered, going by Irving's discussion with Paul and the Trump's discourse at the tuition-based school, being a difficult task is going. Since being a piece of the free enterprise feudal daily existence, and being fanatically cash disapproved, to make one's life significant has been implanted in Paul's brain from an extremely youthful age. That outlook remains in direct inconsistency with Aaron's belief system, which rules Paul's brain, of being liberal with regards to sharing one's assets and doing battle for the persecuted. What's more, it's absolutely impossible to say on the off chance that this situation will represent the deciding moment Paul. It's the sort of predicament looked by individuals from minority networks who figure out how to outperform the limits set upon them by the larger part networks. They couldn't say whether they ought to take full advantage of the open doors they have at the present time. They ought to pursue making a superior future for others from their local area. Armageddon Time doesn't give a substantial arrangement since there isn't one out there. Armageddon Time is an analysis of late-stage free capitalism, and an investigation of the manners by which racial and financial disparities are so profoundly installed into the arrangement of persecution that it's really difficult to accomplish the pursuit of happiness, which the film presents as a paradox. Through Paul and Johnny's friendship, the film grandstands how Paul's honor, anyway little in contrast with his rich, non-public school cohorts, surrenders him a leg on the planet. While Johnny doesn't have similar open doors and is dealt with in an unexpected way, and undeniably more brutally, as his encounters with the police and Mr. Turkletaub uncover, on the grounds that he is dark. Paul's family is an illustration of how getting some distance from fundamental imbalance, as opposed to battling against it, sustains business as usual. Paul is only a youngster, however, and he isn't depicted as a terrible individual, yet a supporter of a framework that consistently acts in support of himself. Armageddon Time indicates that foundational imbalance and mistreatment harms everybody with the exception of those at the top. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the film. Like the videos and subscribe to my channel for more videos and updates.